Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Ed Kranich with the Connecticut Green Bank, and thanks for joining us for the Introducing Energy Storage Solutions webinar. We're going to wait just another minute or two while everyone gets signed on, and we'll start shortly. Thanks. All right. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. The Connecticut Green Bank, Eversource, and UI welcome you to our Introduction of the Energy Storage Solutions program. We're very excited to share this presentation with you all today and show you what we've been working on. The program is the result of a few years of work, which has certainly accelerated in the last 6 months. My name is Ed Kranich. I'm a manager of incentives with the Connecticut Green Bank. And today we'll be joined by Brian Garcia, President and CEO of the Connecticut Green Bank, and Paul Tangretti, Senior Energy Efficiency Consultant with Eversource, and Sarah Harari, Associate Manager of Innovation with the Connecticut Green Bank. We don't have anyone representing UI with us today, but if there are any specific questions for them, we can certainly follow up after the presentation. So our agenda today is to start with a quick poll to help us tailor the audience or tailor the presentation to our audience. And we will then give an overview of the Energy Storage Solutions Program, followed by the specifics for the residential and commercial markets. We'll end with our rollout plan and what's coming next, followed by questions. So if you have any questions during the presentation, please use the question box and we will answer them at the end of the presentation. So now for the poll. If you click next there we go. So what best describes you? Contractor, developer, lender, financial institution, nonprofit, commercial industrial building owner, or homeowner. So the poll will be open on your screen, so we'll just give a minute for everyone to click in their answers. Okay. Okay, so it looks like we have about 50% of you are contractors and about a quarter of you are nonprofit, institutional, and government, with about 20% coming in as homeowners. So good to know. So now I will pass it over to Brian Garcia, our President and CEO.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Well, it's great to see such a diverse audience, especially the homeowners out there. Thank you for joining us. This is an exciting time for all of us to be thinking about battery storage. I wanted to start off by recognizing and thanking our partners. The Public Utilities Regulatory Authority, otherwise known as PURA, has done an outstanding job through something called the Equitable Modern Grid Framework. This is an existing docket. It's docket number 17-1203. It has 11 different reopeners from things like energy affordability, which we're going to be talking about today, which is REO1, advanced metering infrastructure, zero emission vehicles, resilience, as well as what we're going to be talking about today with reopener number 3, electric storage. So PURA has taken a real comprehensive look at where energy markets are in Connecticut, past policy, current policy, and really pulled it all together for us in this docket, as well as specifically within today's program, which we'll talk about. So the battery storage program establishes a 580 megawatt residential and non-residential behind the meter battery storage incentive program That's kind of the overarching picture. We're going to go into much more detail today, but just wanted to recognize the outstanding work of PURA, led by Chair Gillette, Marissa Gillette, and her team. Obviously, leaders succeed based on everyone around supporting the activity. And Director Josh Ryer, Laura Lupoli, Jake Reinert, Stephanie Cohen, and I'm sure there are others. Thank you all for supporting this docket, and specifically around making the processes very inclusive of stakeholder feedback. A lot of folks on this call may not see it, but there are a number of active and engaged groups that were involved in this docket, and PURA has created a process to get them engaged so that the program we're presenting today is much better for it, a lot better for it. Also want to say that, thank you on aligning the DER policies. Today we're going to be talking about battery storage, but it also includes, the integration or trying to ensure the alignment of, Connecticut General Statute 16-244Z, otherwise known as the Renewable Energy Tariffs Program. I think that program actually has a name now. What is it? The Renewable Energy Solutions Program. PURA's done a great job making sure that we're not working in silos, but in fact working across. So thank you to our PURA colleagues for pulling all this together. Also want to acknowledge our Connecticut General Assembly, and specifically the Energy and Technology Committee, led by Chairs Arconti and Needleman, and ranking members Formica and Ferraro, and the rest of the E&T Committee. This past year, they passed on a bipartisan basis Public Act 21-53, an act concerning energy storage, which establishes a 1,000 megawatt target for energy storage by the end of 2030. Today, we're going to be talking about a piece of that. And as I was alluding to before, want to recognize all of you who were involved, public, private, nonprofit, and academic participants in the docket. Your involvement made this program better. You all know who you are. If you've read the decision yesterday, you see yourselves in that table in the appendix. So thank you for all the time and effort that you put into this docket. The program is so much better for that engagement. And as we move forward here in this presentation, I want to acknowledge our colleagues at Eversource and UI. We're going to be co-administering this program, and we're excited to do that. The program's going to launch on January 1st. But really, from the Eversource side, I wanted to, you're going to hear from, recognize Paul Tangretti and Bill O'Connor. Thank you guys for getting to this point. We have a lot more work to do. On the UI side, Jim Mader, Joel Kopelik, Paul Gray, thank you all. We're looking forward to working with you over the coming years. Let's go to the next slide. So now for an overview of the energy storage solutions. But I wanted to say before we begin that it's important to note that the program is still in development. Not all the details have received final approval. In fact, yesterday, PURA issued a decision in the docket. We're still, many of us, reviewing the details of that decision. But broadly, it's great. It allows us to all move forward. But there are some details that we have to make with regards to various programmatic changes in a program manuals and the like. So we're still working through some of that. But know that what we're presenting today is based on the best information that we have. So please be aware that there might be some things that are subject to change before the program launches next month. But big picture, what you're seeing today is a large part of what's happening. Next slide. So this is probably the only overview of the key objectives of the public policy that you're going to get. As Ed noted, we've been involved in this for the past 2 years, and there's a lot of activity, hearings, testimonies, interrogatories, analyses, orders, and more. Lots of really important and substantive work have gone into what you're going to see today. Which has led to a deployment target of 580 megawatts of behind-the-meter battery storage by the end of 2030, half of which will be for residential end-use customers, and the other half will be for commercial and industrial end-use customers, so 290 megawatts each. But in brief, the key policy objectives for the program include the following, and these are important. Cost effectiveness. PURA wants to ensure that the benefits to electric ratepayers from peak load reduction from the dispatch of the battery storage systems exceed the costs of the program. That means the incentives that are being offered to participants as well as the administrative costs, so that benefits exceed the costs by achieving a ratepayer impact measure greater than 1.4. So this ratepayer impact measure of this means that there's no cost shift to the program, that the ratepayers benefit from us achieving this cost effectiveness. There are many policy wonks out there based on the attendee list. We're not going to get into benefit cost analysis, PCTs, UCTs, PACTs, TRCs, SCTs, and the RIM, but know that we went into all of that in a really extensive basis, and that's what's led us to the incentive structure and design that we're talking about. But PURA has prioritized the ratepayer impact measure for this program. Secondly is resilience, right? I mean, we've all are experiencing the impacts of climate. I think in our everyday nomenclature now, we're talking about rain bombs, heat domes, polar vortexes, tropical storms, and hurricanes. And PURA really wants to add another arrow into its quiver for resilience in the event of a grid outage. So the program will allow for the ownership and monetization of capacity rights in the forward capacity markets of ISO New England. Again, this is a technical thing. We probably won't get into too much detail if folks have questions, but it's limited to customers that are installing battery storage systems located on the grid edge. These are locations where they've experienced the top 10 most frequent and longest outages. They're looking to support critical facilities. That critical facility definition is defined by statute and an executive order. They're looking to see battery storage for small business customers. These are electric customers with less than 200 kilowatts of peak demand. And lastly, those commercial and industrial customers who are looking to replace their fossil fuel generators. So PURA has put in a little bit more of the ability for that participant to monetize capacity rights to be able to attract more end-use customers that are located in these important areas of the grid, or these types of end-use customers. So thirdly, PURA, it's no secret that in that docket, the equitable modern grid framework that I was talking about, that the number one reopener has to deal with energy affordability. So PURA has made it important from the outset and is adamant about it, that ensuring that our most vulnerable communities are engaged and enabled to benefit from various programs and rates. So this program provides additional upfront incentives to participants from vulnerable communities, including low-income households. These are households that have less than 60% of area median income and that demonstrate need. Households that are within that are underserved communities, located in underserved communities, otherwise known as distressed municipalities, as defined by DECD. So there's a separate additional incentive for them, and those living in affordable multifamily housing. So again, PURA wants to ensure that our most vulnerable are receiving the benefits of these programs, and ensuring that no less than 40% of all installations are deployed in these vulnerable communities. We're familiar here in Connecticut because we are a solar with justice state as a result of the RCIP. PURA wants Connecticut to be a storage with justice state as a result of energy storage solutions. And lastly, on economic development, they want PURA wants as an objective, we all share this objective, is to make sure the program fosters the sustained orderly development of a local battery storage industry. So there are contractors on this call. There are contractors out there who aren't on this call who we want to invite into the program to become installers. We want to support the development of a thriving industry to support not only battery storage, but energy efficiency and all DERs, solar PV. So this is an economic development program as well. It's important to note that the program is overseen by PURA, paid for by Connecticut ratepayers, and co-administered by the Green Bank, Eversource, and Avangrid. So with that, let me turn it over to our partner at Eversource, Paul Tangretti, to take us further into the structure of the incentive program. Okay, Paul.
Thank you, Brian. And as you all heard, Brian did a great job describing the evolution of how we got to this point today. I want to give you a little bit of sense of what the overview of this particular energy storage solutions program is all about. As Brian mentioned, we do have a goal of 580 megawatts of behind the meter storage. And there are a 9-year commitment to delivering this program with declining incentives, and Ed will talk a little bit about that. But participation in the program is a 10-year commitment, no matter what point during those 9 years you enter the program. And it does include both residential and non-residential customers that can participate in this program. And the 580 megawatts is also part of that 1,000 megawatts, which Brian mentioned as part of the PURA framework to establish, a broader expansion of energy storage across the state of Connecticut. So as you look at the individual classes here, residential and commercial and industrial are split evenly over the 9-year period. The first 3 years, as we look at starting January 1st of 2022, we're looking at 100 megawatts through 2024 of installation. As you can see, that's part of obviously some of the early market adoption. Hopefully that market transformation grows us to 200 megawatts the second 3-year phase, and then 280 megawatts the third 3-year phase, for a total of 580 megawatts for this program. Next slide. So in terms of how the program is designed and how it's set to operate for those batteries installations that are approved for the program, again, we mentioned the residential customer classes, and again, Ed will dig in a little bit deeper, but the underserved, including multifamily and the economically distressed communities, as well as low-income households, all fit in that residential customer class. Commercial industrial customer classes, as Brian mentioned, small is less than 200 kW peak demand, medium falls in the 200 to 500 kW peak demand, and over 500 falls into the large C&I segment. There are 2 pathways to receive incentives, and there's requirements, obviously, for participation in the program. I'm going to walk through each of them separately. And so the upfront incentive portion that you will receive for the installation of your battery will be based on and require the participation in the passive dispatch. The essential outline for how passive dispatch works is that June, July, and August, all weekdays except for holidays during those months, there are 5-hour durations, basically from 3 p.m. to 8 p.m., where your battery will be asked to dispatch and discharge, I should say, during that time period, but never more than 80% of the battery capacity, leaving a 20% capacity for reserve in the event that you have an outage event. It'll give you some backup during that time period. The passive dispatch again is required, and both are required. As we look at active events, those are events that are generated based on ISO New England requirements, where there's some capacity deficiency identified, and those are going to be dispatched throughout the months of June through September. That'll be our summer season, and then the winter season will be November through March. Each of those events are a duration of 1 to 3 hours, and the anticipated dispatch window for both summer and winter will be from noon to 9 p.m. During those days of active dispatch. Next slide. So to just give you a sense of what does that look like for passive dispatch, again, the batteries would all be discharging from 3 to 8 p.m. And again, allowing for 20% reserve of the battery during the 5 hours. You will be dispatching equally and discharging equally. And then the next slide, talks about, sort of represents the override scenario. So on the days that we call an active dispatch during those months of June through September, we would override the passive dispatch setting for those batteries, for those systems, so that you'll never be asked to get into a passive dispatch situation after an active dispatch situation has occurred, because potentially you couldn't participate in the passive period in the event that you've already participated in active dispatch and the battery hasn't been fully charged. So this just represents, this is how our override scenario would essentially work during those months where you're required to do passive dispatch. The other thing to be aware of as well, when there's obviously the known oncoming severe weather situation, we would cancel all dispatches with 2 days notice in advance of that storm, through the storm and through restoration until the system is back to normal. So that battery would be available to you in the event of an event, a storm event coming forward. And I think the next slide goes to Ed.
Thanks, Paul. Now for the residential market segment. Next slide. So our residential target markets are broad and inclusive, but well-defined. We want to ensure all Connecticut ratepayers can benefit from this program. So in our customer classes, we start with the standard rate or non-low income customers. That makes up about 677,000 households in Connecticut. About 560,000 of them are owner-occupied, just for an idea of the size of this market. So underserved residential customers, those are defined as customers in distressed municipalities as defined by Connecticut DECD. So that is a list that's available, also pretty well defined. So qualifying individual projects by this definition, maybe it adds a little bit of an extra step to identify those customers. But we're aiming to make this a little bit easier to identify with resources given to contractors throughout the enrollment process. And finally, low-income households. Those are defined as those whose income is less than 60% of the area median income, or for affordable housing facilities meeting the state definition. For priority customers, we start with grid edge customers. So those who experience longer and more frequent power outages, they're considered a priority for deployment. This doesn't necessarily mean that they would receive an elevated incentive unless they qualify as underserved or low income per the previous section, but it is a program goal to keep capacity rights and participate in the ISO New England forward capacity market for these priority customers. And on equipment configurations, just for an idea of the size and kind of how we're parsing this out for our target markets, of about 1,000 megawatts of behind the meter battery storage capacity in the United States, about half of that is paired with PV. So as you may know, the Green Bank's RCIP program has provided incentives for nearly 42,000 or more residential PV systems in the last 10 years. About a third of those are customer owned and 2/3 are third party owned. So existing solar PV customers will be our initial focus for residential, as they're already pretty well acquainted with the technology and it's a natural pairing. So we believe that there's a good market for residential solar plus storage. On the other side of that, we are also aiming for standalone storage, so batteries that are not paired with a renewable generator. So the program administrators expect that the residential customers installing standalone storage will come through HES or HES-IE channels, who will be introduced to the technology and the program through that way. So pairing energy efficiency with storage as a way to make storage more useful. And again, to reiterate on the HES and HES-IE requirement, it will be a requirement for residential customers to participate in HES or equivalent energy audit measures, just as with other utility incentives and the RCIP. So energy efficiency, of course, is important to extracting the most from your battery storage. So As we've mentioned, some of the target market includes customers with existing PV who likely participated in RCIP, who likely had a HES audit or equivalent audit done, so they would not be required to complete another one to participate. So other customers who have not participated in HES would have to have one in order to participate. So as Paul discussed earlier, incentives are split into two categories here, upfront for passive dispatch and performance-based for active dispatch. So the upfront incentive levels will go in steps similar to RCIP and other incentive programs that you may be familiar with, based on the total approved capacity. The first step will be for a 10 megawatt block, then 15, then 25 for steps 2 and 3. We expect these steps to be active through the first 3 years of the program's operation, approximately 1 step per year as things ramp up. The incentives for residential customers are set for market rate, standard rate, and then multiplied by 1.5 and 2 for underserved and low-income customers, respectively. So the step 1 upfront incentives are $200, $300, and $400 per kilowatt hour in the installed capacity for standard, underserved, and low-income customers. We expect that step 1 can accommodate up to about 1,400 residential customers, assuming about 14 kilowatt hours of capacity per project. So next slide. And so here are some examples of incentives for residential battery storage projects at each of the upfront incentive steps and the performance incentives. So this is based on a 13.5 kilowatt hour battery system, which is about the same as one Powerwall or something of that size. So you could do the math for customers that are installing 2 or 3 Powerwalls. So note that there is a cap of 50% of the total project cost or $7,500. So the incentive is going to be the least of those 3 calculations. So the $200 times capacity or $7,500 or 50% of the total project cost. So these batteries or these incentive values are considering standalone batteries only. They don't consider the federal ITC, which could apply to batteries if it is paired with a PV system. So the value to a residential customer can be even greater if you pair it with PV and you can unlock part of the ITC. So now on to commercial and industrial target markets. So the C&I market is first divided into 3 customer classes based on the peak annual demand. Small C&I are customers with up to 200 kilowatts of peak demand, medium or 200 to 500, and large are customers with 500 or more kilowatts of peak demand per year. This can be found by looking at the customer's annual usage history, which you can get from their account online, or you can find that in their electric bill. So as with residential, we're simultaneously targeting sites with new or existing PV and standalone storage that can come through energy efficiency channels. For priority customers, we have small C&I and small businesses, critical facilities, which is defined as something like a hospital, police station, fire station, water treatment plant, even television or radio stations. So it's pretty broad, and we have a definition that we can include in program documents so you can determine eligibility. And a note also on the priority customers, they can keep their capacity rights. So there will be a mechanism in the customer enrollment process where you can indicate whether a customer is one of these priority segments and whether they want to keep their capacity rights going forward. So next slide. So the commercial incentive levels, as shown here, they're broken up by small, medium, and large, which are based on annual peak demand. So the incentives for small commercial and small businesses are the same as the standard residential rate. Medium are a bit lower at $175 per kilowatt hour, and large commercial, benefiting from scale is $100 per kilowatt hour for the first capacity block. Performance incentives are the same for all classes of customers, C&I, residential, low income, underserved. They're all the same, so they don't change here. So next, we have some examples for small, medium, and large incentives. Upfront for a small system, 10 kilowatt nominal power output and 27 kilowatt hours, which is basically twice what the example residential system was. About 2 battery packs from a major manufacturer. This comes out to $5,400. Medium commercial at the $175 rate with a 250 kilowatt battery, 675 kilowatt hour, comes out to $118,000, and large commercial comes out to $270,000. So as for the performance incentives, we have 5-year nominal and present values. So can show that the incentives can be pretty good for some of these projects too. And just a note on the previous slide, on the capacity block, it's just our estimate here that the program participation for each customer class will be about 25% small, 30% medium, and 45% large. So that's kind of where we're expecting the uptake to be. So now finally moving on to our plan to roll out the program over the coming weeks and months. So while the program is slated to launch January 1st, as Brian indicated earlier in the presentation, we're still working very hard on some of the finer details. So we will have more to come in the first quarter of 2022, but we are planning to be available for this program to launch and for a launch to happen in the beginning of January as is expected. So all of the program administrators, Eversource, UI, and the Green Bank are working on program websites. We're compiling resources for contractors, system owners, and customers, and we're excited to share that in the coming weeks. The program manual, which is really the most important piece of the program and the guide to all of us, is still under development. We have a deadline from PURA of later this month to submit it for their review, and we hope to have an approval shortly thereafter and very shortly before the program launches. So we will do our best to give everyone the most time possible to review everything before applying, and we will be here over the coming weeks. The contractor and system owner application is almost ready to take applications from prospective contractors. We're wrapping up the testing now, and we expect to be able to demo what the contractor application will look like on the contractor webinar next week, which is on the 16th. I believe it's at 10 a.m. or noon. We'll send out another invite, another reminder for that one. But that contractor webinar next week will be important to learning more about the specific process of becoming eligible and how to operate in the program. And finally, the customer enrollment platform, which is the website and tool that contractors and system owners will use to submit projects for incentive applications, is nearing its final testing stages. Again, we hope to have more to share with you on the contractor webinar next week. So next slide. So how to participate. So I think we learned that about half of you are contractors, a fifth of you are homeowners, and the rest are just other nonprofits and governmental organizations on the call. So as a customer, homeowner, or business, building owner, property manager, you'll want to work with an eligible contractor first to get access to this program, to get access to incentives. So once we start approving contractors and building out a network and a list on our websites, we hope you'll have many to choose from in short time. Check the program websites. We'll have the links at the end of the presentation. Some of them are not live yet. They won't be live until January. The Green Bank site is live, but it's still under development. So there's a lot of information to come. So check back frequently. And as a contractor or third-party system owner, again, attend the webinar next week. And if you have projects that are lined up already, just remember that we can't accept projects that have already been energized. So don't do your installations just yet. or else you will not be able to access the upfront incentive, though you could still access the performance-based incentive. And I'm going to pass to Brian for just a note on capital providers and direct payment.
Great. So it appears there are a bunch of contractors out there. So the message Ed just sent was go get eligible. So attend that 1216 contractor webinar and become eligible for the program. And there are a number of homeowners out there as well on the customer side. So from your perspective, you should reach out to your installer and say, hey, I'm here, I'm ready to put battery storage in. So get going, because remember, these incentives are declining. So you want to get your incentives early. On the capital provider side, so one of the really interesting pieces that Pura has been advancing with within all of its dockets is something called direct payment. So for the performance-based incentive, the upfront incentive, as well as tariffs that are being provided through the renewable energy tariff, a portion of that or all of that could be directed from the end-use customer to a third party. Why that's important is because over the years, what we've learned is we want to try to reduce the risk or the perception of risk from financiers of those end-use customers. You know, those end-use customers might be low-income families, might be in communities of color. You know, we don't want them thinking about the risk based on that. We want them focused on the technology. So direct payment allows you to underwrite against the performance of the technology and not have to worry about that end-use customer, not have to underwrite against the customer. So we think this is going to lead to better priced capital, longer-term capital, and making it easy and accessible for those who really need it the most, of vulnerable communities. Again, I'll reiterate that a big objective of the program is that 40% of vulnerable communities target, and to the extent we can go above it, we're going to try as much as we can to go above that to ensure that our low-income and distressed communities have access to these technologies. And to that end, for those of you who are capital providers out in the market, great, bring your programs to bear. If you have a loan to offer, if you have third-party financing to offer, bring it in to provide customers access to that financing. If the Green Bank is focused on, as I was saying, vulnerable communities, as well as delivering resilience to certain end-use customers to ensure that they're prepared and ready to respond in the event of a grid outage, we have an open RFP for Green Bank Capital Solutions. So if you want us to fill a part of your capital structure, we're here to do it, to fill the gaps specifically in this area of the policy that we need to achieve. So reach out to us. You all have our contact information, but know that the program from an incentive side was also thought about from a financing side, so that we can ensure that every end-use customer has access to easy and affordable capital.
Great. And that brings us to questions, of which I think we have many. So take a moment to prepare them, and we'll get to them in order.
Okay, this is Sarah Harari with the Connecticut Green Bank. So I see several questions up at the top. Yes, this webinar was recorded. It will be posted on our website at a later date. And those of you that registered for today's webinar will also have access to the presentation that we shared today. So hopefully those of you that lost the audio stream at some point can go back and rewatch it. So the first question I see, I think, is for Brian. So the question is, if the program is cost effective, why is there a program cap?
Good question. So from the program cap perspective of 580 megawatts, I'll just kind of take it from that perspective. So legislatively, through Public Act 21-53, 1,000 megawatt deployment target was set by 2030. That not only includes behind the meter, which is what this program is trying to do, 580 megawatts of behind the meter residential, commercial, and industrial. It also includes front of the meter installation, so completely grid tied battery storage, which will be developed at a future to be developed point in time, right? So I would suspect that if this program over the course of time demonstrates its cost effectiveness and that it's delivering the results of reducing peak demand on ratepayers, reducing electric rates, providing the resiliency benefits for homeowners and businesses that we believe it will provide, that PURA and other legislators would be open to looking at continuing with the program. But we're just starting day one, right? We've got a long ways to go. We've got a lot of data to collect. We've got to make sure that households and businesses are comfortable with the passive dispatch settings, the active dispatch settings, and all of that. So I love the optimism in the question. We're there with you, but we've got to get off the ground and demonstrate that we can work through this first 3-year cycle.
Thanks, Brian. We have another question in here that's thinking about what is the typical household energy use and sort of how will this be able to, manage in the event of an outage. So Ed, do you want to take that one?
Sure. So the average in Connecticut is about 9,000 kilowatt hours per home. We've seen through RSIP that number can be quite a bit higher for some customers who have large PV systems too. So I think from what we've been hearing from contractors, one Powerwall or equivalent size battery is not really considered to be a standard or enough for some of those customers. So they expect average customers will install at least 2 of them. So that's 27 kilowatt hours of power. It's not expected to power really high load appliances. We actually have a chart which I think we can make available, which had some of the priority appliances and things that customers wanted to power in the event of an outage. So I think that would be a great resource to make available so you can kind of do the math with your customers to find out what suits them best.
Thanks, Ed. Yep, we can include that on the program website. There's another question in here that I'm going to pass to Paul. It's around some confusion around the active dispatch and connected solutions. So Paul, can you talk about how the Eversource program Connected Solutions lines up or doesn't with this program?
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. Definitely, we understand that there could be confusion because we do have currently Connected Solutions, which is a program that's been running for a few years now, where batteries can participate in that program. The main difference between the two programs is the fact that Connected Solutions is really only participating in the active dispatching when there's an event required as a result of an ISO scenario. Those events would be pretty much the same, whether it's energy storage solutions or Connected Solutions. But the difference is sort of the window with Connected Solutions is 2 p.m. to 7 p.m. And as we discussed with this program, noon to 9 p.m. is what we're looking at for energy storage solutions. The other difference, the major difference, is there's no upfront incentives with Connected Solutions. Connected Solutions is only a performance-based program, and there is no upfront incentive that's applied to any batteries installed in that program.
Thanks, Paul. There's another question for you here. I'm going to bundle a few together. There's questions around, if you are a homeowner or business owner, what does it mean to have sort of passive and active dispatch? Is that something that the customer would be responsible for managing? So can you talk to sort of what dispatch means and sort of what, from a homeowner or business owner perspective, that looks like?
Sure. As we mentioned, that the passive is something that's required as part of the upfront incentive. So that's gonna occur on a regular basis, probably going to be set up by your supplier, your OEM, to basically occur on a daily basis, June, July, and August. And if there was a situation where we needed to override because of an active dispatch requirement for that day, your OEM would receive a notification that says, hey, cancel your passive dispatch during that day, we're going to do an active event. So that typically is going to happen through the third-party owner or the supplier who's responsible for that last mile communication to the battery. As a homeowner, you're probably not going to be, have to worry about what's transpiring, because that's usually going to work and be communicated through your third-party owner, who handles the actual device activities as a result of the dispatch signal that's being sent from our dispatching platforms. The one thing we are planning to do is provide notification for override conditions, as I mentioned earlier, severe storms that are coming in. We would certainly want to make sure that you were notified about that. There are potentially other scenarios, although very infrequent, that if there were systems or issues with the distribution or the ISO scenario where there might be system low voltage or safety issues, that we would need to do an override, and we would try to give you as much notice for those kinds of events. But typically that's not a frequent activity that would happen. So the most I would see is that your 30 to 60 active events, which would occur June, July, August, and September, would be overlapping with the passive, where we'd be canceling a passive event for an active event.
Thank you, Paul. And one last question to you before I switch back to asking Ed some questions is around sort of the protection that you mentioned over 2 days ahead of a storm event that customers would not be dispatched. There's some questions around what qualifies as a storm event. So can you talk to that a little bit, please?
Sure. Yeah, the criteria we're using is a criteria that's essentially associated with an emergency restoration plan that's been filed with the regulatory bodies, which includes level 1 through level 5. And level 1 is in some cases you consider it a localized storm, typically a 1 to 3 day event that we would forecast based on what we know about the storm or the event coming in. And so we would try to provide the 2 days notice so your battery would be available in order to kind of deal with those kinds of situations. Right now that would be we're not able to localize those kinds of override conditions, so it would be overridden across obviously all of our customers who are participating in the program, regardless of how small or how large the storm is that fits in that ERP level 1 through 5.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, I'm going to go back over to Ed a little bit. There is a couple of alphabet soup questions around defining names. So Ed, can you please define what DECD is for that definition of underserved communities and distressed municipalities? And then there were also questions about what HES and HES-IE stand for.
Okay, so DECD is the Department of Economic and Community Development. I got that right. They are part of the state of Connecticut. HES is the Home Energy Solutions Program, and HES-IE is Home Energy Solutions Income Eligible. So the HES is a utility-sponsored program for energy efficiency audits for ratepayers. It comes at low to no cost. The IE, Income Eligible, is for income eligible customers to have the audit and measures done at no cost. I got that right.
Thank you, Ed. Okay, there's also some detailed questions in here. So I don't know if Paul Tangredi, you want to answer this, or I might kick it over to Sergio, our Director of Incentive Programs, who's here. There's a couple of questions around how customer rates are going to be changing, and if you participate in this program as a residential customer, if you would be kicked onto a time of use rate or a specific new tariff that would be available to residents. Sergio, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. This is Sergio Carrello with the Green Bank. Listen, we thought about at the time of enrollment of a customer requesting automatically switching customers' time of use rates. However, that never progressed those discussions. So I don't think there's anything that would automatically switch a customer from around-the-clock rates to time of use. It would have to be requested by the customer to the utility. How is the bill going to be affected? I think that's a better question for the utilities.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of, if I understand the question correctly, if the question is about discharging and charging the battery and how that impacts the bill, you know, you're obviously going to be consuming energy to, and it'll be reflected on your bill to charge your battery, but also you're discharging the battery and recognizing that your round trip efficiency, you know, as a minimum of 70%, you know, there are some potential differentials there between what you're paying for charging the battery and, of course, the benefits you get from discharging the battery. But if you're looking at doing something where you're charging the battery at night on a time of use rate, there are some advantages, obviously, to charging off peak, and certainly as you are gaining incentives as a result of your active dispatching, you know, that those benefits would be realized because you are charging off peak.
Thank you, Paul. So there's a couple of questions that are in here around sort of other documents that we mentioned over the course of the presentation, and all of those will be linked on our website in the future, things like the PURA final decision. There's been a couple of questions around sort of requests for example project cost economics for different income groups and different customer classes. All of that's in development on the Green Bank side, so we are working on it, continue to focus on it. If you don't see it soon, it should be up on our website shortly. There is time for a few more questions. One of the questions is, will residents be able to apply in January, even if all the details are not ready by January 1st? Sort of, is there any customer pre-application? So Ed, do you want to take that one?
So we do have a link on our website for signing up for information and contact, but we will not be accepting incentive applications directly from customers. They would have to come through an eligible contractor. And that application can't come without a signed contract and a few other documents that we'll require. So in short, we can take your information to provide you with more information, you know, as we get closer to launch, but we will not take pre-applications for customers before we launch and without a contractor.
Great. There's also
but the application. I'm sorry. The application will be up and running January 1st.
Yes.
And we will be taking applications.
If you sign a contract on December 31st, you can submit it
For a residential customer.
For a residential customer.
Great. There's a couple of other requests in here for links to the contractor event. In the follow-up for this, we will reissue sort of that invite to the contractor webinar next week. And there's a couple questions here around sort of customer eligibility and how do we know sort of which customer class we fall into and how does that all get verified? All of that information will be available on the website, and the contractors will be trained to sort of help guide customers and homeowners through that to help them identify what the incentive level would be for their home. So Brian, a really interesting question came in for you, and I think it's maybe a good place to wrap up. But with the 40% target of low and moderate income communities, can owner-occupied multifamily owners apply for the LMI incentive? And are the batteries going to be sort of in the tenant units? What could that look like for multifamily housing?
Interesting. So I think, let me just say, we are adamantly trying to get as many affordable housing types of projects into this program. So individually metered, centrally metered, you know, every type of perturbation you could think of, we want to ensure that low-income tenants residing within those affordable housing units have backup power and battery storage. Right now, affordable housing has been identified as eligible for the residential incentive based on the decision that came out last night. I was mentioning earlier, we're still all reading through the PURA decision, so trying to come to understandings about it. There's more that's going to be fleshed out on that definition and eligibility that's happening in another docket, the renewable energy tariff docket. So some definitional things that will have to happen. But if you are affordable within a distressed municipality, then I would imagine that you would be able to receive that middle incentive, on a per unit basis. So, this has always been the hardest market to crack. I think if you've looked at all the deployment, the great deployment that's happened in Connecticut over the last decade, the market that's probably received the least amount of deployment is probably multifamily affordable housing. So we want all of your eyes and your energies on it. We believe the incentives are there for it. We're all going to be learning from each other to ensure that we're driving your deployment and investment here. But there's going to be a lot of learning because the use cases are all very, very different. So thank you for the question. Let's keep it going and get those affordable housing deployments happening.
Great. So we are reaching the top of the hour here, and I know that there are still hundreds of questions that have come in over the course of it. So we will do our best to sort of sort through these, answer them. Again, this is our website with the program page. If you have questions, please get in touch with us. We will be publishing an FAQ document in the next few weeks that we will sort of update to include any of these questions that we feel are sort of rise to a more general level rather than specific. And Ed, I'm going to pass it to you to close out the session.
All right. Well, thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Brian, and thank you, Paul. And thanks to everyone for joining and for engaging with a lot of great questions, which there are about 100 of them. So we look forward to getting back to you with some great information over the next couple of weeks. And we look forward to launching a successful program. So thanks a lot. And we will follow up with a copy of the presentation and a recording of the webinar in the next few days. Thanks, everyone.